Hi, welcome back to Do It Your Damn Self. Today we have a Poulan chainsaw to look at. By the looks of things, it hadn't been running for quite a while, and the owner tells me that it's hard to start and won't stay running. That tells me a possible fuel problem. So, first thing I'm going to do is drain the tank, have a look at that gas, and if it's not too bad, maybe try to start it. If it is, I'll go ahead and take the carburetor off, give everything a good thorough clean. It might just need a good tune-up. So let's dive into this thing. So outside, when I got this cover off, I realized there were pieces missing off of the carburetor. So it's no wonder it wouldn't keep running. So my friend is going to get a chainsaw that has a brand new carburetor and fuel lines on it. The fuel line was completely disintegrated inside the tank. The filter just rolled out of there, so I'm going to redo everything. The lines, the primer bulb, and the carburetor. So, and this is pretty cheap actually. I just went on Amazon, looked up the model number of this thing, and came up with this. Didn't cost very much money at all actually. It's looks like a pretty good match. When I pull the other one off of here, I'll make sure to hold it next to it so you can see. But this came with the carburetor, adjustment tool, filter, primer ball, gaskets, spark plug, and new air filter. So actually, if this works out really well, it's going to be quite a bargain. As you pull this off, be very careful. Notice any connections on there. Don't rip anything off that you don't know where it goes. For changing the primer bulb, we'll have to take this cover off. Primer bulb is right here. So all of the fuel lines in this thing look like they were just dry rotted. I don't know how old this thing is or how long that gas has been in there. He also said he loaned it to somebody that he thinks ran regular gas through there, which is a big no-no for these things. Has to have good oil in it, in the fuel itself, to really maintain its engine right. T25 screws. Last one. Just carefully pull that off and set it aside. Here's your primer ball. Alright, this whole thing just slides off. There's a little air intake back here. Make sure that stays with it. Make sure that doesn't get cracked or split. Make note of all the fuel lines in here where they attach onto the new carburetor. You'll be able to see there and up under here. So just as you pull that off, those lines will come off with it. And what I do is I make a little notation on some tape and write it on in place where it goes. That way you know for sure where the lines go when we're putting them back on there. Alright, as I pulled this cowl off before, I noticed that there are parts missing on this old carburetor. That's why it wasn't working. See, the new armature on this right here, this piece right here, is completely missing on this old one. I don't know where it got off to, but that is undoubtedly the reason it wouldn't start, because the choke wouldn't work. So my friend, this is why this was not working. Alright, time to pull the carburetor off. Just really carefully, slowly pull it off. Don't yank anything off of its positions as far as tubes go. It just slides right off of those studs. And they don't give you a whole lot of extra room on these things to work with. Alright, this is how it goes. This is the line that goes back to the filter in the tank. This is also a good another reason that this wasn't working. The line had just completely dry rotted on the end, so it was not getting the fuel it needed, even if it did have this on there. As you can see, the line is just plain falling apart on this. This part just crumbled right off of here, so make note of where that is and where it went to. This is the piece that goes on to the primer ball. Make a note of that on there. One thing to also make note of, the line going from here down to the fuel filter is a thinner line than the one that was over here going to the primer ball. There are two different kinds of line that they've given us with the new kits, the skinnier one and the fatter one. Remember where those go. Feel free to write it down as you go, that way you don't forget. Alright, make note of this. The thicker line going from the primer ball goes down into the return for the tank right here. That is that one that has that nipple on the end that we were talking about earlier. That goes from the primer ball down into the tank. The one that's on the opposite side over here, this one that just snapped right off there due to dry rot, is that little short piece that goes straight over to the squeeze ball, primer ball over here. So it goes from the primer ball up to the side of the carburetor on this side, and that is the thicker of the lines. Alright, let's do the thick line first. This one is the return line that goes into the gas tank to the primer ball. Put a nice little point on there. That way you can get it through the holes easier. You want to dip this in some oil and help it slide through there nicer. You can get it up on the shaft a little bit, get it out of the end, and that'll help put it through the holes easier. So you want to run this down into your gas tank. Alright, so here's the best way to get the fuel line through there. Put it in here as tight as you can with a pair of pliers. Stuff it in there for all it's worth. What's going to happen is just going to come through just enough. You can see it barely sticking through right there, right? Okay, what you need to do, get your long pliers, reach in there and grab it and pull it through. What you're going to do is just grab onto it and just pull for all you're worth, slowly and surely. You can use some oil on this side of the fuel line to help ease it through. It'll help slide, but you just got to give it a nice even pull until you get it through there. Alright, I've got the end on this hose right here so it won't get pulled back through the top. I've got the filter on this hose right here. This is the thin one. And don't let anyone tell you at all it is easy to get these things on here. I had to take a lighter, just an average Bic lighter, and just soften up the edge along here just to make it a little bit more pliable to get this end and that end in there. It just doesn't take long, just really quickly. Just heat it a little bit and it will stretch and expand just a little bit more. Alright, so now what we need to do is pull this all the way up to the top and pull this one all the way inside where it's laying flat on the bottom of the gas tank. Pull out line just enough to get that fuel filter back in there, just really slowly. Don't damage the line. All it needs to do is lay flat on the bottom. Something to watch out for when you're getting these new small carburetors, especially cheaper ones from Amazon or whatever, make sure that they work properly. It should snap back into position. This one just locks in place there. See that? That is not good. Once you put that on your chainsaw, it won't be able to adjust the throttle. It'll just stick in position. It works sometimes, but not very often. This is how one is supposed to work. Smooth action, snaps back into place. So we are sending this one back to Amazon, and I don't want to put down any particular brand names, by name anyway, but yeah. All right, time to put on the primer ball. We got the return line, the thick one there, going out to the long end of the primer ball. That will go down. What will happen, we'll take another piece of the thick line, run it from here up to the side of the carburetor on the left side. So we'll attach the hose here, and we'll go up to the carburetor, and it will attach to this attachment right here. Alright, so gasket time. This is the one that came with it. Make sure how it goes back on. It looks symmetrical. Neither of the gaskets that came with this thing are a perfect match. This one here looks closest to it, but the hole is way too big. So if I would guess, I would say this one right here, since the holes are the same size. Since neither of these are a perfect match, and this one is still in pretty darn good shape, I'm just going to go with this one. Just put it on exactly like it was. Always better to be safe than sorry. Alright, putting on the carburetor. This is how we have it labeled here. This goes to the primer line, which is all set aside for it. This is for the fuel tank line, but now we can take those off. We know exactly which lines are going to them. This is going to the primer line over here. So we've taken off our intake tube off the old carburetor, and we are just going to slide it on the pegs here. Alright, intake tube on there. That is how it should look. Alright, so this is hard to see. This line right here is going to go to the upper left side of the carburetor that needs to be suctioned. One way to tell for sure, since our primer ball is in place, pump it and then cover this and then let it go and you'll make a suck sound. Watch this. See that? Okay, so that is the suction. So this is the going on this side of the carburetor right here. Alright, now to attach your fuel line to the bottom here. It is coming up from the fuel tank. I purposely left a good bit of extra line on here just in case. I don't want to be short of line. So what you need to do is take this, I'll cut that nice and straight, and just work it onto that nipple right there. Okay, that is on. I tried to do good tube management to make sure that no line is worked up around the accelerator cable. Everything has room to move around in there, and there's a little bit of slack. We don't want it pulling out. That is how it should look. It is on there nicely, so what we need to do is just put our accelerator cable right here. All right, time to reattach the throttle cable. That's this right here. Be very careful. Don't break it. I'm trying to find you the best possible camera angle. Put that in where it goes in straight, and it'll just lay back. like that. That is how it should look. You pull the trigger, it triggers it like that. Alright, now to fit the cover back on here, line up the holes, make sure you don't pinch anything, make sure your accelerator cable is free. It might take a minute. Just like that. Make sure all your holes line up. It's like our choke over here is not quite in the right position. Let's get that under here. Alright. That is solid where it is. It is held in place by this. Alright. We need to put our cowl here back on with our pull start. And then we'll reattach this, but this goes first. Just to make things simple, I left the screws right where they belong. I made sure that they didn't come out. So that way we didn't have to figure out what screws go where. Put it in place, lock it down, make sure your primer bulb fits well inside its little window right here. Alright, go ahead and tighten these down just a little bit more than hand tight. Just going to cinch that up. Go ahead and make these hand tight. Alright, go ahead and cinch everything down. Make sure that all the holes still line up here and here. You're not going to tighten this very much. Do not crank it, just until it stops. Same thing with our Torx bit. Just down until it stops. You just want everything just to feel solid. Alright, brand new air filter came with this thing. It came with two different kinds, but this one seems to fit the best, so let's use this one. It doesn't fit perfectly. Let's see. Okay, this one's better. Leave a little extra slack there. If we need to, we can trim some around the edges. But it seems to fit pretty well. Something to watch out for when putting the main cowl back on here. Make sure this wire is forward and out of the way. That way it didn't get pinched in right here. Alright, one more check of the movement here before I put the main cover back on. That is how it's supposed to work. You don't feel anything pinching or too mushy. Feels good. You don't feel anything in the way. Close it down. Alright, I've never operated this particular chainsaw before, but we'll follow the instructions. Primer ball. Let's make sure it is doing what it's supposed to do. It is getting gas up in there. Alright. Just getting all the air out of the lines. Alright, we primed it. We go to full choke. Pull that out. The 2 position. We'll try to pull it 5 times. After that, you go to half choke, which is 1 notch in, and then pull it to start. Let's give it a try, but I'm putting this on the ground. I have no idea how hard this is going to be to start. As far as I know, it hasn't started in years, so fingers crossed. Let's do this. like it wanted to start already. Choke cap in. I got to admit, this was the most challenging and cantankerous chainsaw I've ever met in my entire life. It's obvious I hadn't run in a few years. So, my friend, happy birthday. I've replaced all the fuel lines. They were completely just gone. New carburetor, new filter. Hopefully this will last you many, many years. And from do it your damn self, don't be afraid to do it your damn self, but don't be afraid to consult the experts either. Love you guys.